PopHealth Week is brought to you by Health Innovation Media. Health Innovation Media brings your brand messaging alive via original or value-added, digitally curated content for omni-channel distribution and engagement. Connect with us at www.popupstudio.productions. Welcome, everyone. I'm Gregg Masters, Managing Director of Health Innovation Media and the producer and co-host of PopHealth Week. Joining me in the virtual studio is my partner, colleague, and lead co-host of PopHealth Week, Fred Goldstein, President of Accountable Health, LLC. On today's show, our guest is Sri Ambati, the CEO and founder of H20.ai. H2O is a visionary Silicon Valley open-source software company that creates and reimagines what is possible. A company of makers that brought to market new platforms and technologies to drive the AI movement. H2O is the leading open-source data science and machine learning platform used by nearly half of the Fortune 500 and trusted by over 18,000 organizations and hundreds of thousands of data scientists around the world. H2O democratizes big data science and makes Hadoop do math for better predictions. Prior to H2O, Sri co-founded Platforma and was the Director of Engineering at DataStax. Before that, he was partner and performance engineer at Java multi-core startup Azul Systems, tinkering with the entire ecosystem of enterprise apps at scale. Sri is known for his knack for envisioning killer apps in fast-evolving spaces and assembling stellar teams towards productizing that vision. So Fred, with that introduction, over to you. Help us get to know Sri and his work at H2O.ai.
Thanks so much, Gregg. And Sri, welcome to PopHealth Week.
Thank you for having us, Fred.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Always love getting into the areas of AI, healthcare, all the cool stuff. So why don't we start a little bit? Give us a little bit of your background, how you started the company, and sort of what the company's doing now.
Well, H2O is a movement, and we are trying to democratize AI and make AI accessible and bring it to every person's fingertips and change lives, change the world. Democratizing AI, AI has historically been around with us for a very long time, much before we all were here. But I think it was the haves and the have-nots of the algorithms have been kind of having a big difference. And so our mission is to make every company an AI company and make them use it. So we used open source to do that, and started with an incredible pool of talent. And this was one of the world's top data scientists, mathematicians, physicists, software engineers, a college to a home. And what we've done is essentially make it really simple to both process large and small data sets and produce insights and decisions from data.
Mm-hmm. And you're in a lot of different industries. Obviously, we'll focus today on healthcare, but some of the other places you work in or people that use your products?
So we've about a third of our customer base is actually in financial services and insurance. And we found that one of the top use cases for us is fraud prevention or subprime credit scoring. Democratizing credit is just as passionate. We're just as passionate about it. But as you can see, health is the most important wealth, and most people lose their credit history or lose their path towards a safe retirement because of improper health. And some of the core themes behind how healthcare has focused on was more on care. We want to focus more on health, and the optimizing function we want to have for this industry is health divided by care. Well, how little care does one need to live a long, fruitful life? It all started with the core genesis of the company. Started the company because there weren't enough tools to process large data sets, especially in oncology. My mom was diagnosed with cancer, and the data sets used for lumpectomy versus mastectomy were very, very small. So we were understanding why. I was diagnosing the problem of why people are not using world-class software to address these problems, and we found that open source was not approved or FDA approved. And so what we did was essentially build a world-class software out in the open so the world can use it. And if anything, we have seen a fast follow to the pandemic. We have seen an epidemic of dashboards, but that speaks to how widespread technology and data analytics has become. But what the pandemic has also done is fully humbled us in terms of how much more is to be done. So we are super excited to announce H20.ai Health with some of our, and we put together an incredible team and some of our core customer base, whether it's the likes of Kaiser or Hospital Corporation of America or the open source users. So we begin to start put our team to help with the mission of being there where we are needed.
Mm-hmm. No, it's fantastic. And you mentioned some of your clients, HCA and some others. Can you give us some examples of the work you do in that? I know as I've looked through your website and things, there's a lot of really sort of population health type focused approaches you're taking to look at various issues. So what are some of the things you're doing for these various companies in the healthcare space? Or how are they using your product to develop products for themselves?
At the heart of it, we found ourselves trying to help Kaiser, for example, predict California flu predictions a few years ago. And quickly, those problems led us to start looking at predictions for COVID, if you will. And during COVID, a lot of our customers were stressed on their supply chain, PPE or oxygen. And a lot of our customers have been trying to assess high-risk groups. And if a hospital was close to a senior facility and multi-hospital systems, how do you kind of predict people coming to the hospital? Nursing, staffing, simple issues such as even operational efficiencies. But then at the next level, we started looking at clinical trials for some of our other customers, especially rare disease. How to kind of match patients with the right kind of regime. A lot of our customers started looking at oxygen saturation levels. Like, for example, we have worked with one of the community hospital. The bulk of what we've done is essentially help our frontline workers, right? Healthcare workers have been at the front lines of this war, and we are trying to be on the side, help them to the extent we can with data and analytics and AI.
Mm-hmm. And I know we'll get to COVID in a little bit and talk some more in depth about some of the unique stuff you're doing there. But as I looked at it, I mean, you talked about starting with flu season prediction, but you go into fraud detection, cancer detection, imaging, personalized drug matching. It's really a broad array that people are using your things for. And I tend to think a company is trying to focus in one area. How is it that you've been able to create something that's that ubiquitous?
Well, we took an iconic name, H2O. We're trying to live up to it. To some degree, we want AI to be ubiquitous. I mean, we're repackaging it in different ways, but really we're talking about math, and mathematics is the language of the universe and nature, and we are trying to essentially use it to get some more reasoning behind, get some more pattern recognition to what's happening. As it turns out, a rare condition is 1 in a million or 1 in 10,000 cases, and that's typically how we are looking at data. Certain algorithms like random forest or boosting the signal. These techniques are just as similar to solve when you're solving a fraud prevention problem, but they're also just as similar. So we took the best in class techniques applied in financial services. Oftentimes we find ourselves borrowing those techniques and applying them in healthcare or insurance, and see spectacular low-hanging fruit in those spaces. Sometimes it's about data, so finding good patterns in the data, what we call feature engineering, and we have the world's best platforms to do that. So that allows customers to solve problems in a broad scope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. You talked about the math, and I was reading some of the blog posts. And as they got more in depth into the technical aspects of them, I kind of lost myself a little bit there, which is really fascinating to me to say, you've really looked at this from a technical approach, what algorithms you're using to go and solve these problems. And, it's interesting. We recently had an individual with Change Healthcare on the show, and I noticed you're also doing work with them as well. And they actually talk extremely favorably about that. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done with Change?
Change is actually providing a data exchange, right, sort of in many ways for all the providers. And we found that at the heart of all of problem solving is data. And Change has brought a ton of centralized repository. And what they've done essentially is used our algorithms to streamline a lot of kind of both conversion of unstructured data to structured data, and then from structured data applying algorithms to kind of pull out simple insights that powered their end users. And it's actually exciting to see them merge with one of our favorite customers, United Health Group and Optum, and both of whom have been one of the earliest adopters of our open source H2O. And they've given us so many good insights on how to apply AI, whether to look at fast-moving vectors, whether to look at fraud prevention in insurance side, to helping payers, helping providers. So I think the core of what we're seeing with our customers is applying intelligence to solve problems and predict them as opposed to looking. So historically, you have BI, which is looking behind. AI is looking ahead for patterns and predicting them and adapting to them beforehand. The rate at which data is changing, we need machine learning to solve machine-generated data. And so I think that's kind of roughly, historically, we would look at queries to understand data. What we're doing now is machine learning to kind of predict what's likely to happen in the data.
And if somebody wanted to, say, begin to introduce AI into their healthcare system, let's say it was a provider, how would they go about working with you? Would they get a hold of you, and then you have this platform they can put their data into, and you help them do that, help them understand the AI behind it and the predictions that they get out of it? Is that how you work with groups?
At the heart of what we've done is we've essentially made the product so easy to install and be consumed, either from data science faculties or data engineers. If they're doing anything in the world of data lakes, anything in the world of Snowflake or online, offline, on-prem, they are already probably having a library from us which is doing their core math. And our practice starts when they start trying to productionize the usage of this. We auto-generate a lot of the production inference engines. So we have two phases in the life cycle of data. You're learning from data. We call it training, and then you're scoring new data that's passing by, and that's called the inference. So what we do is auto-generate the inference engines for these data scientists so that they can go into production much more faster. And so typically today H2O is almost a necessary skill set for most data scientists doing practice. So our open source software is running already on their servers or in their cloud environments. And then when they're trying to optimize, automate more of the functions, look for automatic detection of change in data and retrain the models, or all the ancillary functions needed to do the life cycle of machine learning, that's where we've announced H2O AI Hybrid Cloud. This cloud environment runs where the data is. Data has gravity. And so customers end up partnering with us. We have a stable of incredible, some of the world's top data scientists called grandmasters are at H2O. So our data scientists partner with the customer to solve the first few problems, create a simple app, simple dashboard that they can take to their business users, and eventually build their own app stores. I think that's the life cycle of customer adoption for us.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk about these data scientists? You mentioned, their rankings and grandmasters and things. Could you explain to our audience a little bit about what that is? As many of us I certainly didn't know of it in advance, and I'm sure many of our audience doesn't know it as well.
So just like chess, data science has competitions, and so there was a company called Kaggle, which started a community. Along the same time, we started our open source communities. And so we found that these communities would be using the tools and libraries and platforms we're building and competing on against each other using data sets, both public and company given data sets. If someone wins 5 gold medals, they become a grandmaster. So we have 20% of the world's top grandmasters at H2O. World number one, Guangzhou. World number three, Philip. World number five, Mario's. Former world number one. World number seven. So we have the top, several of the top grandmasters, and there are about 200 of them today, and 20 of them call H2O home. These folks are working closely with our customers, finding gaps in our product, improving our products. They're working closely with product teams to kind of mimic best practices. What this allows us is to crowdsource our product roadmaps, if you will. It also allows us to learn from the community very quickly. At the heart of AI is feedback loops. If we can connect fast feedback loops, we can learn faster and grow faster. And so for us, by bringing the users into the company, the power users into the company, the feedback loops are faster. And that's been an incredible tool to both improve the products, but also improve the company. Mm-hmm. Strategically, I would say that many projects in the future will never start without a data scientist in the team. In H2O, we say we don't start a product without a Kaggle grandmaster on the team.
Wow. So, and I find that so interesting to bring that much. It's always cool to see companies that just bring in a wealth of expertise and see what then they develop and build. And you can see, as you've covered such a broad spectrum of healthcare issues, I'm wondering too, obviously, as I was reading through some of your pieces, you talk a lot about it. And it's always a major issue with healthcare, cleaning the data, adjusting it where you don't have data elements and things like that. And one of the issues that's come up more recently with AI is the problem of bias within the data. Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe some of the things you might be able to do or people could do to try and ensure they don't end up in that kind of a situation?
And if you're just tuning into PopHealth Week, our guest is Sri Ambati, the CEO and founder of H20.ai. H2O is a visionary Silicon Valley open source company that creates and reimagines what is possible.
Yeah, so data has bias and historical data has collect what happened. Data is capturing experience, and so it's important to kind of rebalance it in some sense. Avoid proxy columns, for example, proxy to race, proxy to gender, that would otherwise be driving to the same conclusions. And so I think preventing bias starts with using simpler algorithms, which is kind of a contradiction in some sense, where we are pushing for deep learning with most accurate models. And as it turns out, there are simpler equivalents to very sophisticated algorithms. So we have an automatic model distillation function, which allows you to go from a very sophisticated model that's difficult to explain to the business user, difficult to explain to the physician on why he needs to not give this particular drug to a patient to prevent readmission. We need to simplify it. And so what happens is we've created equivalents for the very sophisticated algorithm because we have built both the sophisticated algorithm and the simpler ones in the H2O platform. So that's one side. The other side is to actually tease out adversarial data testing. So where you create how do I, if I pump this change, drifted this particular change, will that cause the model to quickly bias itself and go back to doing things that was before? So that ability to create that kind of test framework, so that our validation framework allows us to kind of make it much more simpler. But fundamentally, data has bias. It's not, we do need the bias to kind of understand and build the models, build the patterns, but preventing it from jumping to conclusions very quickly, whether through safety, putting them safeguards and safety into the guardrails into how the model process is built. I think that's kind of where we build AutoML. And AutoML for us is not done without being able to be explained the model. And that's kind of where it's necessary to understand why the model made the decision it made, because models have blind spots, just like humans.
Mhm. And speaking of bias, and we had the issue obviously with some bias and some AI in healthcare recently. Was this is what we're seeing with COVID, where we have this differential impact on individuals, and we're seeing obviously if you built a model and those individuals weren't in the data set, you're going to end up with a different prediction than having the broad-based model that includes everybody. And you've now moved into this area of COVID and put out quite a bunch of unique features and programs in that area. Can you talk some about what you've done with COVID?
Yeah, I think COVID presented an incredible opportunity for us to take these grandmasters and have them work closely with physicians, hospitals, sometimes community hospitals where they were not ready to. There was we wanted to be there. The last thing you want is the world's top talent not working on problems of that are present in today. And I think that gave us a wealth of insights. One of the first things we found was our open source was being used in China at the outset of the outbreak in Wuhan, and we quickly found out that the virus is just one of the most easiest to spread of many of any other public health disaster we've seen before. As a result, we could pretty much predict from even January last year that what does the first wave look like. Customers came to us, they were trying to ask what for example, the hydrochloroquine problem, or can we use any other rheumatoid drug to prevent going into ICU? How much of the drug will be needed? So we started working with some of our customers. Genentech is one of our customers, so we started looking at their public plans for supply and demand. The other problems, the pandemic impacted toilet paper, right, sort of our cleaning supplies, and so we were looking at demand for cleaning supplies in Brazil, Malaysia, US. How to change distribution centers. UPS is a customer of ours, so we started looking at routing algorithms for a UPS truck to all the way to what should Walgreens have in their stores. We were looking at flu shot predictions in the past, but now we're looking at almost even regular staples in people made more visits to Walgreens. We looked at mobility data, and we were able to find out that de-urbanization was now going to be a definitive trend. Mid-crisis, we could predict that folks were leaving New York City and then calling new places homes, not just in Florida, but along the highways to new places. Michigan had new immigration. You saw the further outbreaks later on. Local retailers were still having different things to stack up. So we started looking at the whole economic piece as a whole, and PPP loans. We're looking at which business is likely to come back. COVID impacted small medium businesses quite a bit, and it impacted women more from a work standpoint. A lot of women dropped out, as you could see. But above all, I think it impacted the Black and Hispanic community quite a bit in the U.S. And so we couldn't use, talking about bias, we couldn't use has COVID or has been infected by COVID as a variable to give loans, because it was really a proxy for race in many places. Mm-hmm. And long story short, we found ourselves at the throes of all our customers asking for more AI, more analytics, continuously learning systems, not just quarterly models now became weekly models or daily models. And being able to react to those changing conditions became almost a necessary skill set for our customers, and whether they were hospitals or retailers, FMCGs. So that meant that we rebuilt our entire software stack in a way that people can quickly deliver business insights by using data, and the modeling became almost automatic, semi-automatic. So that's what we released. We released Wave, which allows people to build quickly these dashboards and applications. But we also released our AI Cloud as a way to reuse all these use cases into there. We also build an NLP engine that looks at all the publications that are happening on COVID and summarize them on a daily basis or summarize them so researchers can quickly look at what were the real trends. Social networks where Twitter was a huge force during this phase. So we started looking at some of those feeds to pull up what were the topical top of the trending news so that we could start making them available. Physicians found themselves trying to adapt regime on the fly. So we started looking at some of the community hospitals to see how we can take the latest regime that was working better to apply for most aggravated cases versus more oxygen saturation issues. How to predict what is the likelihood of someone running into a ICU or not. Ventilator demand was something that we looked at with some of our customers. Globally, this was a very important, I would say, significant event of incredible scale. I think it's gotten us to reflect more on how we can be more prepared for the next pandemic. And the variation, the mutation of the virus B118, we started working with some of the epidemiologists like Nick and others who basically have been working on both sides of the pond, Imperial College London and here, where the data in other countries has been much more easy to access. Our practice with Singapore or Asia and China, the data sets were far more easy to pull up and start looking for trends. I think the US owes itself to transform the public health data systems. And I think a lot of good changes coming. Telehealth, efficiency of telehealth, that's the other trend that we're seeing. Sure. And so all said and done, I think the event horizon for innovation has been fast forwarded by at least half a decade, if not a decade, because of COVID.
Wow. Well, I mean, there is so much to unpack in the stuff you've done. It is just unbelievable. I think what we're going to have to do, Sri, is get you back on at some point to dig a little bit deeper into some of these individual areas and get some more information about what you're doing in that, because it's so broad. It's unbelievable to listen to you talk different countries, different from the supply side to the demand side to the clinical side. You really dive into a lot of it with the AI tools. So I want to thank you for coming on PopHealth Week. It's been fantastic having you as a guest.
Thank you for having us.
And back to you, Gregg.
And thank you, Fred. That is the last word on today's broadcast. I want to thank Sri Ambati, CEO and founder of H20.ai, for his time and insights today. For more information on Sri's work at H2O, go to www.h2o.ai or follow them on Twitter via H2OAI. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode of Pop Health Week, please like us and do consider subscribing to the show on your preferred podcast platform. For Pop Health Week, my partner Fred Goldstein, this is Gregg Masters saying, bye now.